Hello everybody, today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I know I say that every time, but this time it really is different. That's because today we're going to be going through all of the various discoveries and things that I've learned in Fear and Hunger. Now, if you didn't know, I'm doing a blind playthrough, and all that means is that I've been avoiding looking things up on the wiki, looking up guides, anything like that. I've been playing pretty much completely blind. That being said, most of the information in here is as accurate as I know it to be, but there still may be several things that I missed or different strategies that may work better. This isn't really a definitive how-to, this is just everything I've learned compiled into one video. Because of the overall length, this video is going to be comprised of 4 different sections. We're going to cover how to get all of the characters, how to fight every enemy in Area 1, that's going to be like basically up to the caverns or the thicket, and then Area 2, and then we're going to go through a walkthrough proper of the best routes that I know how to set up a good save for taking the rest of the game on. There will be timestamps in the description to every different section so you can skip around. It's not necessarily meant to be consumed all in one go, but of course you're welcome to do that if you wish. And without further ado, let's get started. In this first section, we're going to talk about how to get every character that I know how to get. There may be other characters in the game that I don't know how to get or I'm not aware of yet, or characters that I just don't know how to recruit, but as of right now, this is what I know. So first we have the girl. To get the girl, all you have to do is unlock her cage with either a small key or lockpicking. She comes with no skills and less equipment, and generally is kind of a nuisance to keep alive. However, you can give her a dagger, and that'll at least make her attack for some damage as opposed to none. You can also give her the peculiar doll, which as far as I know does nothing. However, if you curse her dagger to give her even more damage, and then teach her a couple spells, she can actually become a valuable asset in combat. As far as other uses, she might be useful as a sacrifice, or you could just give her to Pack-a-Cat for some loot. Next we have Kahara, which you can find in the first level of the jail. To get to him, you need either lockpicking, a red vial, or the jail keys. And he's always going to be in the far upper left cell. Unfortunately, he doesn't come with any skills, but his starting sword is pretty nice for getting rid of ghosts. Now, whenever you recruit him the first time, he will leave on the first screen after the jail. After you leave the jail cell, he'll be gone, and he's either going to steal maybe some silver or some blue vials. You will not get these back, so just forget about them. They're gone forever. Later, in level 6 of the mines, if you backtrack a little bit from the path you would normally take, you can find him again and recruit him back to your party. Overall, I'd say he is an okay party member, not really worth going out of your way to get, but, you know, you take what you can get here. Next, we have everybody's favorite doggo, Moonless. You can find Moonless in the caverns, usually next to the bridge, and he's actually going to attack you at first. What you have to do is not attack, but use the talk skill. You're going to talk to him twice, and each time you're going to give him 1 rotten meat. After the second one, he will join your party. Now, Moonless is an interesting character to get, because he only eats rotten meat, really, or fresh meat, I think. I haven't tested that. But he attacks randomly, and usually goes for, I think, low HP body parts first. So he's kind of reliable, kind of not reliable, and he can't wear any armor, so he's pretty squishy too. He will, however, attack twice every round, which is incredible. He is a limb-chopping machine, and he's pretty much a free party member since you don't really have to feed him, and he can't wear any equipment either. To find Ragnvaldr, you gotta find the mock-up book, and then use it in the library next to Enki to unlock the courtyard. Once in the courtyard, he's going to fire an arrow at you, and then when he asks, "Are you evil?" you're going to say, "No." At this point, all you need to do is exhaust his dialogue. See, Ragnvaldr has trust issues, and he's not going to trust you unless he's had a couple good conversations with you. After that, you can find him hanging around in the thicket. All you gotta do is drop down 1 level, and he's going to be in the upper left here. Once again, exhaust his dialogue. You do need to exhaust all of his dialogue options, and then he'll join you. For equipment, he comes with a short bow, which is not great, and also the fur armor, which is also not great. For skills, he has a war cry, which forces an enemy to attack him. However, its usefulness in combat is, we'll say, limited at best. Darcy can be found in level 6 of the mines if you take the left path near the spiked heads, and then in order to actually get her, you have to kill this cave dweller that's beating her up. For equipment, she comes with a longsword, which is a very nice weapon, the Eagle Crest Shield, which is a very nice defensive option, and the Plate Mail, which is a great body armor. For skills, she comes with Fast Attack and Defense Stance, which are both pretty useful in their own rights. And combined with her excellent starting equipment and powerful attack, she is one of the most useful party members that you can grab. The next couple of party members actually took quite a bit of testing to figure out how to get in the first place. And that's because the first step is to engage the Yellow Mage in a very specific way. What you want to do is talk to the Yellow Mage. The first time, ask which gods do you serve, and then answer Grogroth when it asks you a question. And then for the second one, you're going to ask, can you teach me? The Yellow Mage will then tell you about its master, Nas'hrah, and give you the Eclipse Talisman to show to him. Now for the second character specifically, you're also going to need the Cube of the Depths, but we're going to cover how to get that a little bit later. Now the first character that needs this specific requirement of the Eclipse Talisman is Enki. What you want to do is talk to him at the beginning of the game until he's annoyed with you, and then just leave him alone. Later, you can find him behind a locked door in the level 7 catacombs, and all you need to do is talk to him, exhaust his dialogue, and then talk to him again. He's going to ask for the Eclipse Talisman, don't give it to him, and he's going to offer his services. Enki comes with the short sword and the high priest robe, neither of which are worth mentioning, but at least he comes with his own weapon. And he also comes with the skills Needleworm, Hurting, and Counter Magic. Counter Magic and Needleworm in particular don't really matter too much, but Hurting is an excellent skill. If you want to have a mage in the party, he's a solid choice, and overall I think he's a solid pick. This next one really surprised me, but it is Nas'hrah, who is a former old god who has lost his body. In order to get him, as stated before, you need the Eclipse Talisman and the Cube of the Depths. Then what you're going to do is return to the Blood Pit and investigate the walls. This is going to lead you to a combat situation with Nas'hrah, and you're just going to talk to him repeatedly. As long as you're generally picking the least insulting answers, you should be fine here. After that, he's going to join your party in an attempt to get his body back. Now, Nas'hrah is probably the most unique party member that we've discussed so far. He is essentially completely free. He does not need to eat, he doesn't leave when his fear gets too low, and he can't even die. He'll always have at least 1 HP. He can't equip anything, which means his physical attack is going to be very weak since you can't equip him with a weapon. However, his magic is some of the most powerful I've ever seen. He comes with Pyromancy Trick, Black Orb, and Greater Hurting. Greater Hurting is the enhanced version of Hurting. See, normally Hurting takes 40 mind to cast, and Greater Hurting does the exact same thing, but it costs just 10. That means it's spammable. Now, he can run out of mind, so that'll need to be restored with either ale, tobacco, or opium. However, that is a small price to pay given the utility and strength of these spells. Now, on paper, a party member that doesn't need to eat and can't die sounds incredible, and it is. However, given his weak physical damage, he actually loses out on utility as compared to someone like Enki who can cast spells or physically attack. He's kind of pigeonholed into being the party mage, for better or for worse, and that means he's going to eat up a lot of your alcohol resources over time. This can be a blessing and a curse. For one, you have an incredible party member when you need to use him, and you can kind of just ignore him and pretend he doesn't exist for the rest of the time. But that does mean if you at any point run out of alcohol or run out of resources to pump into him, he becomes dead weight. And since he can't die, that means you actually can't get rid of him either. Overall, he's a unique pick that I would consider taking at some points, but there are definitely pros and cons to adding him to your party that need to be considered. And lastly, we have the man of the hour, the legend himself, Lagarde. Lagarde can be found in a cell in the level 7 catacombs, and most specifically, he's in the last section. The door is completely unlocked, however, it is guarded by an elite guard, which can be tricky to kind of kite around and not engage with. After you rescue him, you might have some dialogue from the rest of your party, but he will just join you. Now, as soon as you rescue him, you're going to want to equip him with a weapon and probably some other equipment, because the only thing he really has on him is some plate armor. However, he does come with a very useful skill in leg sweep. Leg sweep does require a light bladed weapon, so like a one-handed sword, and not something like the claymore. But when you use it, it instantly destroys an enemy's legs, which usually will make their head immediately targetable. Lagarde also has the second highest attack stat of any of the characters I've seen, so it's probably best to give him a highly damaging weapon and then have him go for the torso while your other characters target limbs. Overall, I think you could make a solid argument that Lagarde might be the best character in the game, and he is definitely worth picking up, if not for story reasons, then for his utility in combat. Now, something I just want to add on to kind of the end of this analysis of getting all of the characters is Nas'hrah and Lagarde specifically have a lot of different dialogue options. And by that I mean they will regularly interrupt your runs to add either story or flavor or tell you what they're doing and how to accomplish their goals. This leads me to believe that both of these characters might have a stronger story impact rather than simply their utility in combat. So that's it for how to recruit every character. Now we're going to go into how to face every enemy in the game. But first I want to cover some basic principles on how to fight basically everything. For one, you don't fight. In general, just don't fight anything. It's not worth it. It's not worth taking fights. 90% of the loot in this game is trash, and there's no experience. If you are forced to take a fight and you don't remember how to face a certain enemy, going for the head is usually a safe bet. You may also want to attack certain limbs if you see that a certain limb has a very specific weapon. And most of the time, if you see that a certain body part is heavily armored, that one's going to have more hit points. In the beginning of the game, if you take a few fights, it's usually not a big deal, but as you delve deeper and deeper into the dungeon, you want to be increasingly conscientious of which fights you're taking and why. Taking bad fights unprepared is why you lose 90% of your runs. So by getting better at combat and remembering the golden rule, when in doubt, run, you'll be able to make your runs much more successful. Also, I apologize for the mic quality in this next section because I recorded that one first and then figured out how to make my voice sound consistent later. So, apologies. Alright, so first up we have the regular guard. For the regular guards, you're just going to attack their left arm, the one holding the cleaver, and then on the second turn, you're just going to guard. Guarding prevents their coin flip attack from going off at all. Next, you have 2 turns where the guard's going to basically do nothing. There's a small chance that a stinger attack's going to hit you, but you can just attack the torso twice or hit the head once, and that usually is enough to take them down. If you don't get the guard down within 2 turns, you have to guard again, and then you have 2 more turns to do whatever you want. And that's how to safely take out a guard. For spoils, you can get some fairly useless equipment, maybe some food. On a rare chance, I get a small key, but I mean, that's pretty much it. Next, we have the Elite Guard variant. The Elite Guard is not worth fighting at the beginning of the game. Pretty much just want to run anytime you see them. Then you have the Cultists. For the Cultists, all you have to do is hit them in the chest. If you talk with them, they give some lore info, which is interesting, but just hit them once in the chest and they'll go down easy. For the Cultists, you get a guaranteed Purifying Talisman, Priest Robe, and a Soul Stone. Next, we have the Prisoner. For the Prisoner, the best way to engage them, honestly, is probably just to avoid fighting them. But if you have to fight one for whatever reason, if you talk to them twice and ask what's their origin, and then convince them not to be alive anymore, they will literally just die. And that's probably the best way to take care of them. Unfortunately, they will attack you 3 times, and each of them have a chance to infect and also cause bleeding. So some really nasty side effects. You don't want to be fighting these guys. They don't even drop anything, so just don't fight them. Next up, we have the Iron Shakespeare. Now, these guys are pretty dangerous. They do about 30 damage a hit, but they are fairly inaccurate, and all you really got to do is hit them in the chest twice, and they go down. Now, for spoils, if you use a soul stone, you can actually get the Iron Shakespeare soul, which increases defense by a little bit. But they also drop the cell keys for the jail, but you can just get those from a guard, so not really worth it. Next up, we have the Manivas. Don't fight these. If you can, avoid them. If not, just hit them in the head. If you do miss their head, then they suck you in with their tentacle attacks, and you can't escape. And they drop nothing, so don't fight them. Next up, we have the Cave Gnomes. Now, the Cave Gnomes are interesting because if you talk to them and choose the specific dialogue option, Qui, then they all get stunned for like 1 turn. And if you choose the wrong option, then they add 1 to their numbers. So, I mean, they're easy to avoid, so just avoid them and they don't drop anything. So next we get to find out what exactly happens when you try and sleep in the safe bed after you already slept in it. As you can see, it all seems okay, and then the freaking Crowmauler appears, and wrecks your day. There's nothing you can do here. You really can't escape, and he's just going to wreck you. Like at this point in the game, there's nothing you can do. You're just dead, so don't do that. So next we get to find out what exactly happens when we attack certain characters. So right here we're attacking Sir Seymour. I think you can only attack him when he's alone. So that's going to be before you save the other guy, Buckman. And this guy can be a pretty tough fight. It seems like he can get rid of your limbs pretty easily. What you got to do is you got to focus on his arms and get rid of that greatsword that he's swinging around. After that, he can't do anything to you. So after you get rid of the sword, all you got to do is attack the legs, and then attack the head, and then he's dead. And you get to see his drops. His drops are actually incredible. His soul is just a lesser soul, but you get a chain hood, which is a pretty good defensive item, and the freaking claymore. The claymore is a two-handed weapon that does the highest damage of anything I've seen in the game thus far, so it might be worth killing him just to get his sword. So next we have Trotur, or the torturer guy. And all you really have to do to fight him is to ambush him. And then when you fight him, you just hack off his left arm, and then he can do nothing. And then you just hit him in the body and he's dead. That's it. He does drop a useful key, but that's about all there is to it. So next up we have the few characters that we meet in the first half of the game. The first one is Enki. Now, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that none of the characters are probably worth fighting. In this fight, you can see I get absolutely wiped. I try and go for the body first, and that doesn't work. What you have to do is you have to attack his left arm, so he can't use hurting to do a massive amount of damage to you. And then, you can take out his left arm if you want to prevent his stun attack, because he also stuns you. And what do you get for this ordeal? Not much. You get the High Priest robe, and you get the Ever-Watching Talisman. The Ever-Watching Talisman may prevent you from getting scared, but his armor is not great. Next we have the Outlander, and I have no idea what he drops, because I could not beat him, and I don't think it's necessarily possible or likely that you'll be able to beat him. So I tried to go for his arms here, and it doesn't work. I keep missing his arms. His arms, I guess, are insanely evasive. And then next I try and go for the torso after that. And he must have like 1,000 something health, because I was not able to beat him at all. It's probably not worth it. Now, for all enemies moving forward, unless otherwise stated, just run or avoid everything. I would say in about 80% of cases, there's nothing to gain from fighting, and you'll just lose hit points or otherwise get infected. This section specifically exists to tell you how to fight an enemy if you get backed into a corner, or if you really want their loot. The first thing that you should know is that the Crow Mauler is going to be chasing you the entire second half of this dungeon. There are two distinct messages that appear. One says a terrifying presence has entered the dungeon, or like you feel a terrifying presence or something. That just means he's spawned and he is now chasing you. When it says a terrifying presence has entered the room, specifically entered the room, then you know he's there. He tends to chase you very slowly, so you should be able to outrun him. All that means is that you can't dawdle, you can't take your time, and you probably shouldn't backtrack. If you do accidentally run into him, your best option is running. You will not be able to take care of him with less than 4 party members and some pretty dedicated items. We're going to discuss the strategy later, but for now, just run as fast as you can. For the first real enemy, we have the Elite Guard. With the Elite Guard, it's pretty much the same as the Guard, except the right hand has a Morning Star that does like 30 damage, and I think can stun, but it can definitely break bones, which will lower your maximum body for the run. So again, remember, as with all guards, you're going to attack, guard, attack, guard, attack, guard, and continue that pattern. What you want to do here, though, is you have to make a decision on whether you're okay with broken bones or sliced limbs, specifically arms. Either way, with 3 party members, you're going to have to pick one. So double attack one of those arms, and then with your other party member, single attack the other arm. Then you can go for the torso or the head, doesn't matter. The Stinger also has like 500 HP, so in this case it probably isn't worth it to attack it, and it doesn't really drop anything of note. This is a very dangerous fight. Try not to get yourself backed into a corner by one of these, and don't fight them. Next, we have the Old Armor. The Old Armor is the suit of armor and the spirit of armor that is blocking Nosramis's room. To actually attack it, you gotta examine the armor on the ground and then select attack. Doesn't matter if you investigate it or not. This is a pretty simple fight. It can attack you, and it can also summon a spirit to help it along. All you want to do is get rid of all of the pieces of armor, and then that's it. Once all of the armor is removed, it is dead. If it does summon a spirit and you're unable to attack it right now because you don't have any cursed swords or magic or anything, just run and then re-engage the armor. You'll have saved your progress from the armor pieces that you destroyed before, and you can continue on. Most of these pieces only take 1 or 2 hits anyway, so it's a pretty simple fight. For the Yellow Mage, there are a couple different ways that you can go about this. The left leg specifically causes hurting, which will destroy a limb and do a whole bunch of damage to you, and we don't want that. The left arm is also particularly problematic, and the right arm also casts spells, and I believe so does the right leg. So the safest way is to get rid of all the limbs first and then go for the body, but you could also just hit the left leg and then go straight for the torso if you like. Really doesn't matter. Their loot table is pretty big. You can get anything from soul stones to soul devouring necklaces to spell skills from Gorgoroth specifically. There's a lot of good stuff there, and I would definitely kill these just for the loot. They're pretty simple. Next, we have the Cave Dwellers of the Cave Dweller Village. These guys are exceedingly simple. You just get rid of the rock in their hand, and then they can't do anything to you. And they drop nothing. There is a variant with a spear that's quite a bit more difficult, and it does drop the spear on death. And the spear is just a regular iron spear, but it's dipped in poison. They're all pretty easy to avoid, though. Next up, we have the most annoying enemy in the game, the Spirit of the Miner. Even if you have cursed weapons, it's probably going to take a couple hits. And their only real move is to suck the life out of you, which doesn't do anything at first, but if it happens 3 times, your character dies of a heart attack. On top of this, they're in the most narrow passageways imaginable, and they're very, very difficult to avoid, and they're insanely persistent. And they're also a ghost, so there's no body to loot if you're curious. Next, we have the Masked Man, and the Masked Man is very interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, he only appears in level 1 of the dungeons after you've already returned after getting Lagarde, I think. That's the only way that I've gotten him to spawn. He'll normally sell you a couple of maps, which are very cryptic, and I have no idea what to do with them. But you can also just attack him. If you don't attack him the first time, you lose the option to attack him, and his drops are pretty nice. To get rid of him, he's pretty simple. You just attack the torso or the head. I've never had a problem with him. And he drops the Iron Mask, which is going to be needed for the Crowmauler fight. Next, we have the Lizard. And the Lizard, I believe, can spawn in the blood pits or in the bottom of the mines towards the explosive vial that's guaranteed. These guys are pretty nasty. You want to get rid of the sword as quickly as possible, and you also want to get rid of the tail. And then after that, you can just attack the torso or the head. Doesn't matter. The sword can hack off limbs, and his bite attack that comes from his head will poison you. As for drops, he pretty consistently drops a spider shield, which is a decent shield, but I really wouldn't go out of my way to fight him just for that. Alright, so now we're going to cover our first boss of the run, the Cave Mother. You can find her if you go the wrong way in the caves and start finding eggs, and then try and retreat backwards. She can be pretty intimidating, but as long as you know how to take care of her, it's not actually that big of a deal. There are 2 things to keep in mind. Firstly, her head can poison you, and secondly, her breasts will draw extra gnomes towards the fight, and that's going to make things a lot more complicated. There are 2 ways to get rid of this first phase. You could either target both of her wings or target the torso. For me personally, the wings have less HP, so I go for those first. You can also remove the breasts to prevent gnomes from spawning, but that's not really necessary in this first phase. After you beat her, no matter how you defeat her, she's going to fly away. If you continue going back towards the blood pit, you will fight her second phase. The second phase is a little bit more complicated. She has no wings this time, but she does have legs that are vulnerable. The first thing you want to do in this phase is get rid of the breasts as a priority, and then you have 2 options. You can go for the torso, or you can cut off both legs and go for the head. Both options tend to take the same amount of time in my opinion, so it doesn't really matter which you do. This is one of those fights that's perfectly avoidable, and if you really do want to kill her later, you can always come back with more party members. For your efforts, you get a gnome egg, which I have not found a use for, and you also can potentially get her soul. The Cave Mother soul increases damage slightly, I think, and that's about it. Less useful than a lesser soul, in my opinion. Next we have the wooden door. Just kidding, but you can fight those. Next, I actually want to talk about some variants of a couple of different enemies, in particular the Night Lurch, which we haven't covered yet, and the Prison Guard. I've also seen them on a few enemies, and they keep randomly popping up, so this might just be a variant for all enemies. I'm just going to call this the Flower variant, because I have no other name for it. You want to fight them exactly the same way that you would fight the base enemy, but the only difference is you want to take out the flower first. The flower can use pollen, which is a pretty nasty side effect. That's basically like confusion in like the Final Fantasy series, where it causes your allies to attack themselves. If you do get affected by pollen, it remains after battle, and the only way I've found to get rid of it is worm juice, for some reason. Next, let's talk about the dogs. The dogs are a rather dangerous enemy that I really wouldn't recommend fighting. They can almost never back you into a corner, and I've had some pretty good success with running. They also don't drop anything, but if you really want to fight them, here you go. On the first round of battle, you want to talk to the dogs and throw a stick or maybe even some rotten meat, and that's going to distract them for exactly one turn. In that turn, you want to be attacking the torso with your other characters. You'll probably have to hit the torso twice, and then they go down. If you don't manage to defeat them in 2 rounds, they're going to do a coin flip attack, and you could probably guard this, but hopefully you've taken them out by now, because if you haven't taken the dogs out by now, you're dead. They just do a lot of damage and cause infection and bleeding and everything else, so kill them quickly. Now we're getting into the thicket exclusive enemies. First we have the Mumbler. The Mumbler is incredibly annoying and has the same issue that the spirits in the mines have, which is very narrow corridors and very persistent. To get rid of these guys, don't attack the head. If you attack the head, it's going to poison you, and unless you have a white vial on you, you're going to die. Their arms really only do mind damage, not physical damage, so if you don't care about going insane, you can just ignore everything and attack the torso. If you do care about going insane though, you're going to have to hit each of the arms twice because they have around 300 hit points, which is just enough to where the average weapon won't kill it in one shot. Additionally, its head might occasionally do this spirit draining attack, which drains your soul. I don't think it's the same attack as the soul draining one that the spirits use, but it's a similar effect. If you get hit with it 3 times in a run, you're dead. I would really go out of my way to extra avoid these guys. I know you want to avoid all fights, but just go extra out of your way to avoid them. Oh, and you want to guess what they drop? Nothing. Next up is the Spirit in the Sword, the Assassin Spirit. You can actually just run from this, and it'll occasionally fight you again, but you can just run again. It has around 1000 HP, so good luck if you want to fight it. If you do manage to kill it though, you'll purify the Eastern Sword and have one of the best swords in the game. As for the fight itself, when it says that it turns its sword sideways, it's going to counterattack you. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. Spirits don't have any limbs. Next we have the Night Lurch. These guys can be pretty difficult to avoid, and if you show your back to them, they can give you a debuff that hampers your movement for the rest of the run. They are blind though, so occasionally you'll get a chance to ambush one. If you're solo, I would recommend running until you get a chance to ambush it, and then aim for the horn and then the head. That's it. If you're not solo, you could just focus all attacks on the torso and be fine. For loot, you get a paltry 5 silver coins. Alright, now we got our second boss of the run, the Salmon Snake. To get to it, when you enter the mines, it'll be the first locked door on your right. Then you examine the shiny thing in the pool and he'll ambush you. To do this fight properly, there are 3 things that you need to know. For one, you can attack the eye as a separate target. This will leave it blind and cause most of its attacks to miss, making the fight much easier. Second, the arms and the torso have a massive amount of HP, so when you're trying to do damage to it, focus entirely on the head. And for 3, I didn't get any footage of this because I killed it so fast, but every round the tongue is going to curl in its mouth. When it does this, it's preparing to attack. All you have to do to prevent it is hit the tongue once, and that's it. So to recap, you want to hit the eye, and then pay attention to the tongue every round, and if it's curled up, you want to hit it. Other than that, focus all attacks on the head, and it should die very quickly. I've noticed on these higher hit point bosses that if you put a dot like poison or burn on them, it seems to be pretty effective. As for spoils, you get the salmon snake meat, which can be eaten safely raw, but if you grill it on a stove, it'll actually restore all of your hunger points. You can also loot the salmon snake soul, which in my opinion is the best accessory in the game. Not only does it prevent limb loss, but it also prevents infection. In fact, if you have an infection and you give somebody the salmon snake soul, it'll cure that infection. So when you think about it that way, it's basically infinite green herbs, plus arm guards, plus leg guards. Absolutely incredible. To get the salmon snake meat, you do require a skinning knife, and to get the salmon snake soul, you need a soul stone. And because of its high HP pool, I do recommend skipping it the first time around and then coming back and fighting it when you have a full party. Hi, Editor Me here. You also get the stone crown, which is a pretty good helmet. Doesn't do much else though. Last but certainly not least, we're going to fight the Crow Mauler. Before you even attempt this fight, I recommend a full party, and you're also going to want the Iron Mask from the Masked Man, Isaiah. Ideally, you'll also have some of the best weapons and armor up to this point. Specifically, you'll probably want at least the Purified Eastern Sword, a Cursed Longsword, potentially a Claymore or other powerful weapon, so your party should be fully kitted out and ready to rock and roll. You also want to make sure you've picked up at least one red vial and at least one of a priest lantern or throwing knives. If you don't have one of the last two, you might be able to get away with using pyromancy trick, but I wouldn't rely on that. You should be aware going into this that party members are either going to get killed or at the very least maimed, and there's a good chance that one of them is going to get blinded. There are definitely ways to mitigate this, but this fight is never safe. There's no safe way to fight this that I found. So I would make sure you have a contingency plan for after the fight, just in case things go south. Make sure you either have an extra party member that you can pick up, or you're ready to perform a Sylvian marriage, or something like that. Also, before you enter the fight, you're going to want to equip your main character with the Iron Mask. The Iron Mask is the only equipment I've found that prevents blindness, and the Crow Mauler can inflict blindness on you. If that happens on your main character, you cannot see. So that's pretty much a guaranteed reset. If it happens to anybody else, it'll just lower their accuracy permanently, which isn't great, but at least you can get rid of that party member later. Now we're on to the fight itself, and it can actually be pretty challenging to find the Crow Mauler if you're out hunting for them. Just keep looking, make sure you have plenty of food and ale supplied, and eventually you'll run into him. To start the fight, we're going to give it a taste of its own medicine and blind it with the red vial. Make sure you're aiming for the head. Next, we're going to do a damage over time effect like poison or burn, and we're going to aim for the chest on this one. Quick side note, I don't know if it's just my luck or not, but I actually haven't been able to inflict burn on him, so he may be immune. Either way, poison is going to do about 500 to him, and he only has about 1500 hit points in his chest. So one poison application and one critical hit with a good weapon, and he's down. There are two specific attacks that you need to be aware of, besides his normal attack, which does a good amount of damage. The first one is going to be Peck. This is going to be an instant kill on one party member. They're just headless and they're dead. As far as I know, there's no way to prevent this, so just pray. The second attack is going to be Flock of Crows, which inflicts blindness. I have no idea what the chances are for each of these attacks, but it seems pretty low for both. I would say every round you have about a 50% chance of getting hit with either one of them. Since both attacks are devastating and potentially game-ending, I would just get rid of it as fast as possible. For winning, if you use a Soul Stone, you can get the Crow Mauler Soul, which just increases damage by a little bit. But you can also get the Crow Emblem Key. This took a lot of running back and forth in the dungeon to actually figure out what this did, but in hindsight it's pretty obvious. It opens the door with the Crow emblem on it. This door is found in level 1 of the basement with all of the Manibas, and behind it is something terrifying. This is the sword Miasma. Of all of the weapons I've found in the game, this one is by far the most powerful, and to top it all off, it is one-handed. That means if you give it to Lagarde, he can use leg sweep with it, and you can also carry a shield. However, I think there may be a downside to collecting this weapon. I haven't done enough testing yet, but when you grab it, there's a line about voices in your head, so this is giving like Frostmourne vibes. And by that I mean, I feel like it's going to trigger some sort of cutscene or something. Like maybe if you give it to Lagarde specifically, he's going to turn into Crow Mauler version 2 Electric Boogaloo and start chasing you around the dungeon as a Death Knight. But maybe that's just my fantastical imagination. I actually haven't seen it do anything, so it seems perfectly safe. It's just, the vibes are off. That's all I'm saying. Next, we're going to be going over all of the important items and what they do. And then we're going to go through an item checklist so that you have kind of a visual on what exactly you need to be on the lookout for. And for this one, we're going to kind of go rapid fire. Explosive vials have two uses. The first one is to open up shortcuts or treasure rooms. And the second one, in combat, they do like 50 damage to all body parts of an enemy. This is one of those items that as you learn the game, it becomes more and more useful and you start seeing more and more uses for it. Small keys can open up a bunch of doors or chests. This is specifically useful at the beginning of the game when even taking down a wooden door is kind of an ask. But as long as you have one around for emergency situations, you'll be fine. The only use for a quill I found is to write in an empty scroll, and we're going to talk about that when we talk about empty scrolls. Red vials can be used pretty much in the same way as small keys can, but they can also blind opponents if you fire them at their head specifically. White vials cure poison, green herbs can cure infections, blue herbs heal 10 body each, but a better use of them is to craft them into more powerful healing items like blue vials or a mixture of blue and red. Food items and alcohol are almost always useful, especially things like meat pies, cabbage, dried meat, and salami. Those all restore around 30 hunger. In addition to alcohol, you also want to find a pipe with some tobacco and opium. Tobacco and opium can't be used in combat, but outside of combat, they can be used to restore a bunch of mind. Tobacco, I think, does about 30, but opium will restore all of your mind. And I did test this. Opium has no negative effects, and neither does tobacco. And the last one to really watch out for is the pine cone. Just make sure you get one, that's all you need. Now we're going to cover the books and give you a quick recap. For book drops, the single two most important things are the Book of Enlightenment, which allows you to save at any point, and then the Empty Scroll, which allows you to get any skill or potentially any item in the game. Next, you want to be on the lookout for the Alchemilia Volume 1. This is going to allow you to craft your own healing items. You also want to be on the lookout for any scrolls that could teach you a skill. So for example, Scroll of the Black Arts or Scroll of the Longsword. The Passages of Mahabra are a pretty good item that can transport you instantly to the city of Mahabra. It's not permanent, it's just temporary, but you can get a few items there and it can get you out of certain sticky situations. You also want to be on the lookout for any recipe books. This is going to allow you to transform your regular food items into actually good food items. So for example, the Recipes of the 15th Century allows you to make mushroom stew out of just 3 dried mushrooms. And that is going to go a long way in keeping your entire party fed and happy. And the last one that you really want to be on the lookout for is the Pinecone Pig instructions. This is going to allow you to craft the Pinecone Pig, which has a random chance of giving you some loot in the middle of battle. It's usually nothing amazing, you might get an explosive vial or red vial, maybe a blue vial, but over time, this can definitely pad out your inventory and increase your chance of success by quite a bit. So that's it for books. Next, we're going to talk about items. There are a ton of useful items in the game and some that aren't so useful. A lot of these are going to be situational, but you're going to run into a lot of situations and having more items is going to help you. In general, kind of a priority list is you want to find at least one explosive vial, one key or potentially several keys. You want to find a quill, a red vial, a white vial, some blue vials, especially if you can find some light blue vials. And then if you can find a pine cone, that's nice as well. Now, while you're looting, you want to find a bunch of food items, preferably really good ones. One of the best foods that you can just find as a drop is the meat pie. That's going to solve a lot of your hunger problems. And then you're also going to be on the lookout for ale, and then a pipe with some tobacco and some opium. And that's going to solve the fear issue. I just also want to say that if you don't find all of these items, that's not a big deal. If you find most of them, or even just some of them, you can have a pretty good run. There are also items that I didn't mention that are perfectly useful as well. I just didn't list them here because I think they're a lower priority. For this next section, we're going to talk about all of the equipment in the game that I found and how to get them if I haven't already explained it. We're also going to go over what everything does because it's not properly explained in game. For generally good weapons, you want to be on the lookout for the Iron Spear or the Ritual Spear. The Ritual Spear does the exact same amount of damage that the Iron Spear does, except it applies poison. Then you have the Meat Cleaver and the Sawtooth. Both of those are pretty decent damaging weapons. You have the Morning Star that can be either randomly dropped or it can be dropped from the Elite Guard. Then you have the Longsword. And then the last weapon that I would consider normal is the Claymore. But to get that one, you have to kill Sir Seymour in the basement. It's not a random drop. You can also get a claymore from trading Girl to Pocket Cat, but I usually don't do this because it's kind of a hassle to do. And all of the weapons that I've mentioned so far can be cursed to increase their damage output. Cursing a weapon increases its damage by roughly 30, I think. It might not be consistent for each weapon, but it also allows you to hit specters like ghosts. For these next two, I know you can't curse one of them, the second one I'm going to mention, but I know for sure the Eastern Sword can't be cursed. So the two most powerful weapons that I found in the game are the Purified Eastern Sword and the Miasma. We've already discussed how to get the Miasma, but to get the Eastern Sword, you have to loot it in the thicket. It's just sitting in like a pile of rocks or roots or something. And then you have to kill the Assassin Spectre that is after you pick up the sword. For helmets, it's pretty simple. Just pick the ones with the highest defense, and usually those are pretty self-explanatory. The only three real standouts are the Plate Helm, the Iron Mask, and the Stone Crown. The Plate Helm is a random drop, and it prevents you from getting stunned. The Stone Crown can be looted off the Salmon Snake, and it just has really high defense. But the flavor text seems to suggest that it does a little bit more than that, but I haven't figured that out yet. And the last one, the Iron Mask, can be looted off of Isaiah, I believe his name is. It's the masked man that appears sometimes in the first part of the dungeon. So the flavor text for the Iron Mask states specifically that it protects the eyes and the whole face, but specifically the eyes it draws attention to. The only attack that I know that hits the eyes is the Crowmauler's Flock of Crows, and then I tested it, and sure enough, it does work. And that's when I learned that the Crowmauler really doesn't like to show up when you want him to. For body armor, the only real two pieces of note are the Plate Mail and the Iron Cuirass, and those are just because those are the two highest defense items that I found. Both are random drops, but I tend to find them a little bit more often than the Armory, which doesn't surprise me at all. Now for shields, again, it's just the highest defense. It's the Eagle Crest and the Spider Shield. The Eagle Crest shield is a random drop, and the Spider Shield tends to drop from the Lizardmen. Now for the accessories, boy oh boy, there are a lot of good ones. Probably the most powerful two are the Sorcerer's Stone and the Salmon Snake Soul. The Sorcerer's Stone tends to be a random loot item, but you can also sometimes find them on the corpses of mages. And what it does is restores 10 mind per combat round. This is incredibly useful for mages. Unfortunately, Nas'hrah can't equip it, but you can throw one on Enki. The Salmon Snake Soul is what happens when you use a Soul Stone on the Salmon Snake. Pretty self-explanatory there. And it does many things. First of all, it prevents all limb loss, so you can't lose your legs or your arms. I have not actually tested if it prevents the peck attack, but it might do that as well. It also prevents bleeding, but it also cures bleeding, and it doesn't say that. And the other curious thing is it protects against and cures infections as well. I found this out by accident, and I'm not sure if it's a bug or not, but it seems to be pretty consistent. Every time I equip it, it gets rid of an infection. This is my favorite accessory by like a country mile. I'm also a big fan of the arm guards. I have found these as random loot, but I most consistently get them from Darcy's intro. All they do is increase your defense by a bit, and it prevents you from losing your arms. Then we have the Pinecone Pig, which is a craftable accessory. This one isn't super useful on its own, but every time you start a combat, there's a chance that you'll get a random loot item. And fun fact, it doesn't matter how many times you run away from the same enemy, you'll keep getting that chance to get a random loot item. Sometimes it's trash, sometimes it's treasure, but every single time that little Pinecone Pig runs across the screen, I get a little giddy. So maybe this is secretly the best accessory because it's the only accessory that lets you get a little pet. The last normal-ish one that I want to mention is the eyeglasses and the monocle. Both of these increase your accuracy, and that's super useful. I haven't noticed a big difference, but it's certainly better than nothing. Then we have the two cursed rings, the Thorned Ring and the Ring of Stillblood. Both of these, once you equip them, you can never take them off. These are mostly notable because you don't actually want to find these. You want to actively look and make sure that you're not getting these. And that's because for some strange reason, whenever you hit the optimize feature, it'll often automatically equip one of the cursed rings and then you're screwed. That's it. Your accessory slot is gone for the rest of the run. Now, both of these do have a use. The Ring of the Stillblood does prevent bleeding and it cures it, and the Thorned Ring will prevent and cure infections. So I could see a situation where you're just completely out of cloth fragments or out of green herbs and you really need to save a character and don't necessarily want to use the bone saw to remove an infection. So in that very niche case, maybe it's good to keep around, but I would just watch out for these and make sure you're not getting them. So now we're going to get to an actual run of Fear and Hunger, and we're going to kind of walk you through how I like to think of things and how I like to do things. Specifically, I want to talk about how I want to set up a master save file so that I can continue to have good runs and I have like the best possible chance of continuing on. The most important thing here is I'm going to play the intro and I'm going to get dash. This is going to allow me to move faster, and then I'm going to save. So here immediately we pick up the pine cone, and we also pick up a quill. And then about 3 seconds later, I pick up an explosive vial. This is turning out to be a really good run. So next we're just going to kind of explore the dungeon and loot a bunch of stuff. Here we see the girl, and we get a couple more items of loot, but nothing super notable. Then we get a white vial, which is fantastic. Then we're going to avoid the guard and loot the library. You'll see me avoid a lot of enemies in this run. In the library, the top shelf is always the mock-up book. We also pick up the Alchemelia, which is going to let us craft healing items. And we also pick up a Book of Enlightenment. This is great so far. You don't actually have to read the books to get the recipe. I just do that out of habit. We're going to continue up, and you can get 3 pieces of rotten meat here. And then we get to the courtyard where we can grab our herbs. I don't open the well right here, but I really should. Next, we're going to kill the dark priests and take their stuff. And then we're going to loot the captain's quarters. I believe the book on the desk is a guaranteed small key. And then we loot a scroll of pyromancy trick, which teaches combustion. We get an ale and a leather helmet, and we get the pinecone pig book. All good stuff. Now you'll notice in this next hallway, I'm actually walking on the right. That's because if you walk on the left, there's sometimes a trap or a pitfall that you can fall into or otherwise get hurt. That's going to derail you. For the next library, my drops are trash, but we are going to talk to Enki. All you want to do is talk to him until he tells you to leave him alone, and then leave him alone. Now we're going to stroll through the courtyard, grabbing the herbs along the way, and there are 2 spots here that you can use to increase your affinity with the gods. The first one is the statue of Almar, which you can pray to, and it'll increase your affinity with him. It's one of the few ways to actually get affinity with him. And the second way is participating in the Sylvian ritual. The Sylvian ritual will restore all of your health, and I believe restore like poison and disease, but it won't restore limbs. And then we're going to talk to Ragnvaldr and exhaust his dialogue. So next we're actually going to go back through the dungeon and do something I should have done when I was there, which is sacrifice the guy in the statue. That is the second and last way to gain affinity with Almar, besides just praying to him. Then we're going to run into Buckman and kill the torture guy to progress the Buckman quest. And then after we slay this guy, we're going to go in the bed and we're going to save. This is not entirely safe, but I've cleared out the rest of the dungeon, so it should be. And with that, we've laid down a pretty good foundation for a save. We're going to continue down into the dungeon and do some other stuff that we forgot to do. So we're going to open up the Hexen area, then we're going to open up the well, and then we're going to go back through the dungeon, and we're going to pray to Almar, and then we're going to go back to the Hexen, and we're going to gain a very important skill. The pathing here leaves something to be desired, but it doesn't really matter in the end. So the skill we're picking up is called Blood Portal, and it's going to allow us to fast travel to any of the ritual circle locations. And you'll also notice that I forgot to actually grab a soul so that we could get the skill in the first place, but you know. So now we're going to activate our new skill, Blood Portal. You do have to produce a portal on each of the circles or you can't fast travel to them. And then we're just going to go down through the first couple levels of the second section of the game, the side path, and grab up all the herbs and important bits. Really, it's just the herbs that you need. And sometimes this little room spawns here with some armor. So we're going to pick up that, and then we get ambushed by the Black Witch, which doesn't really matter. We're just going to kind of run through it. If this happens to you, just don't forget to loot. So next we're going to go to the side here. Usually this path is on the right. And then when we see the flames, we're going to quickly go to the left and dodge the Iron Shakespeare. We're going to continue looting as we go. You can actually go back and loot some of the stuff that's below this sort of safe bed area. Then we're going to dodge the Iron Shakespeare again and continue to loot. Through the second half of the dungeon, there will not be much food, so you want to loot all the food that you need here, and then you can pick up some supplies along the way. We're also going to talk to Buckman here, and you see we have a really close encounter with the Shakespeare, but it doesn't matter. I really don't know how to do Buckman's quest yet. I haven't gotten that far, but there is an entire armory that you can loot here, and now would be a great opportunity to equip some of the equipment that you've gotten so far. Then we're going to rest in the bed and save for progress. So we're in a really, really good spot right here. We have a clean, fresh save. We haven't recruited anybody, which is important because that means that we can make those decisions later or make different decisions on different runs. This is a perfect starting position for basically any kind of run that you would want to do, and we have total freedom as to who we recruit and what we want to do next. So now we loot the room and hit the lever, and there's multiple different setups for the different kinds of guards that are in here. If you fight the normal guard that is in this back area here, he will drop the cell keys and then you can loot the jail. But in particular, the worst variant is going to be the elite guard. You pretty much have to avoid them, and sometimes you really, really can't, and you can back you into a corner. Next, we're going to use the key to grab Kahara real quick. Then we're going to go up through the jail again, avoid the nail. Technically, you can loot the rest of the jail here, but I don't think it's worth it to do it, so I don't. Then we're going to loot the captain's quarters. I do pick up the passages of Mahabra here, which is pretty nice. And then we're going to continue on through the jail, through the blood pit, and down into the depths. So now we see Kahara leaves our party, and he stole a blue vial. That's not a big deal. And now we're going to activate the mechanism and go down into the cave. We're going to pray to the statue of Sylvian and then recruit Moonless. This is your first big party decision, so if you save after this, make sure you save in a separate save file. Regardless, we're going to continue on through the mines, and if you take the left path here, you actually need to use an explosive vial, and it's kind of a shortcut, but there are actually a couple important things that we want in the mines, so we're not going to do that. We're going to avoid the Night Lurch, and this door actually leads to the Salmon Snake, which is a great boss fight if you can kill him and take the soul and then skin him for his meat. I checked my inventory here, and I actually don't have any of those things to take advantage of the fight, so I'm just going to wait till later. I don't manage to avoid the Night Lurch on the way back, so I actually take quite a bit of damage here. And keep in mind the Crow Mauler is going to be chasing us through the mines now, so it's probably best not to backtrack if you can avoid it at all. We find another circle, so we're going to lay down our blood portal, and we're going to pray to Gorgoroth this time. And we find the armor that's important for Nas'hrah's quest, but I'm not strong enough to beat him right now, and I can just loot it later, so I'm going to do that. Unfortunately, I don't engage the Yellow Mage quickly enough here, so it actually manages to get hurting off and destroys my left arm. That's going to be a reset. Alright, so while we're catching up to our other run, let's talk about the layout of the dungeons. So in the first half of the game, and that's everything before the caves, everything kind of loops together and you can more or less freely switch between paths as you wish, as long as you've unlocked a few things. But in the second half, you actually have to decide whether you want to go to the mines or the thicket, and then you're kind of stuck until you reach the bottom. Since there's a fast travel point at the beginning of the mines via the ritual circle, and the loot is slightly better, even though it takes more time and it's a bit more dangerous, I always like to do the mines first and then kind of scout them out. I do like to separate the upper and lower halves of the dungeon for a few more reasons. One big one is loot. At the start of the game, most of the good drops you're going to get are RNG based, and there's plenty of food and random drops. But in this lower half, supplies generally get a lot more scarce, and the good drops that you do get are generally guaranteed. Meaning if you take the right path or fight the right things, like the Salmon Snake, you can get those things every time, no problem. This is one of the big reasons why it's important to loot the entire first half of the dungeon and then drop a save. You're basically locking in your good drops so that you can repeatedly use them as you tackle the lower levels. And you might have to tackle the lower levels quite a few times before you actually get a successful run. So now we're going to fight the Yellow Mage and pick up the Eclipse Talisman. Coming up here, this is where we could recruit Darcy if we wanted to. We would just take the left path after we enter the new section of the mines. But since we already have Darcy, the loot's not really that great in that particular section, so we're just going to skip it. The Yellow Mages are pretty easy to kill, and they drop some really good loot. So we got a Scroll of the Black Arts and a Soul Stone. So because we didn't get Darcy, the Cave Dweller Village is passive, which means that we can loot it freely with basically no consequences. So we're going to enter this hut at the top right, and we're going to follow the path there, and that's going to be pretty much the fastest way to get in and out of the village. And despite what I said earlier about not having supplies, there is actually quite a bit of supplies and food here. In this second part of the village, if you go a little bit south, you'll see a cave dweller with a yellow hat. She's actually a merchant, and you can trade with her for some pretty useful things. This house in the middle with the cave dwellers having lots of fun. If you climb the ladder, you can actually find the rope next to the child that's staring blankly off into the distance. So now we're going to go to the north and grab the Cube of the Depths from this area, and we're going to avoid the cave dwellers on the way out because they are all hostile. Then we're going to drop the rope and go down to the next section of the mines. You can stop here and refill your hunger if you want, but pay close attention to this path that I'm going to take here. We're going to go up and then follow the right path all the way around until we get to the end. Now, if you do want to recruit Kahara, you actually have to go back and explore that section a little bit more thoroughly, but all the crates have been looted and there's nothing down there, so don't worry about it. We take a dumb fight and lose the dog, but luckily we're about to get Lagarde and Enki, so we're not worried about it too much. The dog has very little defense, so it's more of a temporary ally anyway, but I'm still kind of upset that I lost the dog. So trudging back through the mines, we're going to go down and left, and then eventually we find Kahara. We're going to pick him up. He's an okay party member, and he'll do just fine. Still upset about losing the dog, though. We got what we came here for, so we're going to take the explosive vial and then just leave as fast as possible. I do have to run from quite a few fights here, but if you just keep running and keep running, you'll eventually get out of there. So like I said, I got to run from a lot of fights here. This particular section of the mines is very dangerous, so I wouldn't recommend sticking around any more than you need to. This next section of the catacombs is pretty simple. In the middle here we have a locked door, behind it is Enki and a ritual circle, and then on the stand there's a book of enlightenment. On the right there are two guards. One's going to be in the little grass area, and the second one is usually an elite guard, and that one is the one that's actually guarding Lagarde. And then on the far left, if you go up there, it's actually a shortcut all the way back to the start of the dungeon. But at this point we have 4 party members and I'm happy with our setup, so we're just going to keep trudging along here. 2 things to note here. 1, don't forget to equip Lagarde with your best items. He does have some of the highest attack in the game that I found so far. And don't forget to use any spell scrolls or other skill scrolls that you may have found. So now we're going to fast travel through the dungeon once again, but this time we're just picking up stuff that we didn't pick up before. We're going to do stuff that we haven't done yet, and now would actually be a great time to drop a save using your guaranteed Book of Enlightenment. So we're just going to blitz through this. We're not going to linger or do anything else. And now I just want to note that this is going to kind of be the last section of the guide. We're going to cover the ancient city just very briefly at the very beginning, because that's all I've thoroughly explored so far. And I'm also going to run through the thicket just real quick, just to kind of show it's there, but it's actually a really simple area. So here we fight the salmon snake for its good loot, the salmon snake meat, which is a great meal item, and then we're going to use the soul stone to grab the salmon snake soul, which is one of the best accessories in the game. Now, I actually skipped the thicket in this run, but I want to show it off anyway. So first off, to get there, you need the explosive vial, and there's really only 3 reasons to go down here. 1, it's faster, 2, you can get Ragnvalder, and 3, there's a really nice sword. To actually get through the thicket, you want to examine the northern walls for soft spots that you can open, and you're also going to look for these dark spots on the ground, and those you can actually jump down. Most of them are perfectly safe. As you can see, Ragnvalder's on the 2nd level, and also on the 2nd level is the sword that we want. After you collect those, it's just a matter of getting down as fast as possible, and I mean, I'll show the rest of the route, but that's really all there is in the thicket. Kind of boring, to be honest. Not much happening. There's a cool purple orb that we get to destroy, a purple pustule of some kind. Don't know what that's about. And you probably want to avoid fighting the purple guys because they're not worth anything and they don't drop anything. So now we return to our regular run. We're going to go up and left here and then up again. I'm just going to get rid of all the doors by attacking them, not worth wasting any resources. And you'll notice behind me there are zombies that appear, but if we move fast enough they won't hurt us. Now it's worth noting that we're not going to go through the whole city of Mahabra, we're just going to loot everything and then sprint to the next save point. So we're going to go up here and then we're going to light the torches and go up the stairs and to the right. So here we find a strange woman being dragged off by the Lord of Flies. So we're just going to kill the Lord of Flies and then talk to her to progress the quest. This is going to bring us all the way back to the beginning of the dungeon, but we can just fast travel back to the catacombs and then continue on from there. But we will have to fight the 3 zombies on the way, which does kind of suck and makes me wonder if this quest is even worth it. Now, on the way back, we're actually going to encounter part of Nas'hrah's quest that we didn't finish earlier. This is kind of a mistake on my part. I forgot to actually do this, but all we're going to do is we're going to examine the armor and then attack it. All you have to do is get rid of all of the armor on the body. You can just ignore the spirits and continue attacking the armor. No spirits appear in this fight, and that's probably the best case scenario here. So after that, you get to loot Nas'hrah's quarters. They have a few good potion and scroll drops, so it's worth looting everything here. And I believe if you do this the first time that you go down into the mines and don't actually rescue Lagarde first, you actually get an opportunity to talk with Nas'hrah and potentially further their quest. I'm not really sure on that yet, but either way, you get some interesting lore. So now that we're back in the ancient city, we're going to transfer to the past, and we're going to pray to the statue of Grogroth there. And we're just going to go to the right again, this time during the day, and there are no encounters. We might as well loot everything while we're here. And we're just going to go up the stairs. It's a long winding path. And then we're going to reach the Tower of the Endless. So the Tower of the Endless, if you specifically go there during the present, you won't actually get the dream sequence, and it is just a safe bed, and we're also going to drop our blood portal. And that is the safest and best way I know how to traverse the Dungeons of Fear and Hunger. Now, real quick, I want to talk about two things that I didn't get to over the course of the video, and that is the marriage and the empty scroll. So if you go to a sacrificial circle and select Show Love and pick a candidate that is willing, so basically not the dog or the girl or Lagarde for some reason, or Enki, because every time I try and make a marriage with Enki, it doesn't work and it glitches out the game. You'll get a cutscene that I probably shouldn't show, and the result is that the two characters merge into one. I believe you get the skills of both, and potentially the attack bonus of both, but I'm not sure on that one. Either way, you'll create a character called the Marriage, which is a very disturbing character, and it's kind of gross to look at. But because you're making a new character, that means that all status conditions and all limb losses and everything else are completely cleared. This includes otherwise incurable status effects like blindness, and it also fully restores your body and mind. Or rather, it resets them to default, which is full. I'm just going to say I don't think it's very worth it to create a marriage just because, but in a pinch, if you're really in a desperate situation, I could see where a marriage would save your run. The second thing I want to mention is the empty scrolls. You do need a quill to be able to write on the scroll, and these tend to be a pretty rare drop from bookshelves, although you can find them guaranteed in at least one place that I know of. Now, throughout the game, you might have seen a couple books on stands that say something like, "Oh Lord, teach hurting," or like, "Oh Lord, give enlightenment," and they're always in all caps. And if you've ever opened an empty scroll, it tends to want 3 different verses, and I tried it. I tried it out. The first one went pretty well, and I just got the skill hurting, and that was fine. But then when I tried it with the enlightenment, I don't know if I made a very small spelling mistake or something, but I thought I spelled everything right, but it didn't give me anything. I'm assuming that was going to give me a book of enlightenment or something. I don't know. But either way, I'm assuming that you can ask for other things, and I've tested this, and it kind of works. Some of these skills and items don't actually fit on the page, and half the time when I try and ask for those things, I don't get them anyway. I'm sure it's pretty specific, and I'm also sure that there are limits as to what you can ask, so you probably can't just ask to be restored or something like that to fully heal yourself. But it's still pretty interesting nonetheless, and I really do want to do more testing. It just takes a lot of time. If you want to do this yourself, you can find the empty scroll in Nas'hrah's chamber. It's just sitting open on the desk. So that's it. That's the end of the video. I don't really know how to end it, so just thank you for watching. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. And if you've looked at a wiki or looked at guides, my only request is that you don't spoil that in the comments. Please only leave your own discoveries if you do want to share in the knowledge, and I would appreciate that, by the way. And don't forget to do all the YouTuber stuff, like, comment, subscribe. I do read every comment. This is a teeny tiny channel, and I'd appreciate the feedback. Thank you.